the way that aid is directed, it's often very easy to just give food aid, aid in the form of food. But how can people on the ground actually determine what types of aid or what types of support they need in terms of infrastructure or inputs or things like that? I mean, you've done some work on the ground through your organization FANRPAN. Can you talk a little bit more about the way that you go about analyzing those needs?
What's exciting is that we've adopted an approach which we are already implementing, where we are looking at livelihood assets. And really, there are 5 fundamental assets that people have or could have in a rural setting. First and foremost is about people. You're talking of smallholder agriculture that's labor intensive. So if you don't have the right numbers within a household, you cannot go into agriculture. Secondly, you're talking about social networks. You find with the region I come from, it's the hyper-endemic area for HIV and AIDS. And there's been up to 40% reduction in labor available for agriculture due to the impact of HIV and AIDS. So if you are not mapping who is there to provide resources for farming, you will be providing aid, but nobody is farming. We've seen already from the work we've done that 50%, 1 in 4 of the smallholders that received inputs in the form of seed just washed that and used it for food. So really, we need to understand what people's needs are and what assets they have for farming. The third critical asset is access to natural resources, land and water. We've been giving people seed and fertilizer when they have no arable land. So we need to go out and map who has what resources. Finally, is the issue of financial resources and physical assets. If you do not have a hand hoe, how do you go out with the seed pack you've received and the fertilizer to farm? And we are saying if we can map on average at least for 1 million of the smallholder farmers in every country to say, can we target those farmers that have the requisite assets for farming? Then we provide them with the input support and the technologies for farming. We'll be able to double productivity. Currently, the blanket intervention of everybody needs food aid. You have countries like Swaziland now where 80% of the whole population is dependent on food aid. And yet, of that population, you have 300,000 households that are willing to farm. If you took time to understand what assets do they have, if you provided them with a hand hoe and then the seed pack and the fertilizer pack, they would be on their way to recovery. But these blanket solutions have not helped. So we are mapping the livelihood assets for households and making that database available to government and to non-governmental organizations. And we are working with World Vision in Southern Africa, which is the major relief NGO that is now keen to move on to development in terms of helping people move from being basket food aid cases to development aid packages, and agriculture is key. Yeah.
I think you may just have touched on my question, but could you detail more who is going to make sure that if you're successful in securing this support, that the delivery takes place to the people that are targeted? Rely on existing agencies, or are you, because I think there's new talent and new knowledge that is required?
I think what's come out clear is that if you look at the development arena, we just reviewed statistics where worldwide, globally, there's 5,000 think tanks and only 5% are in Africa. And of those 5%, 90% are just in one country, South Africa. Now, if we are talking of knowledge sharing, generation of knowledge, civil society developing evidence to inform policy processes, where is that going to come from? But what's even more interesting is that every African country has a national state university. But the training in those state universities has been published for the international community. Don't do research that informs local policy development. There's that disjoint. And what we are calling for under Farming First is generation of local knowledge to inform local policy processes. There's a lot of talk at global level, UN level, a lot of talk at national level, very good policies, but where we fail is at implementation, because the weakest are put at local level and the best brains are at national level. And really what we are saying is, unless we can empower civil society, the media has a critical role to play, because every ordinary citizen wants to read the newspaper, wants to listen to the news on radio. But we have not had journalists who are packaging information that will empower civil society to make our governments accountable. We've left policy in the hands of government and also implementation to fail because we are not part of the process. But if information was made available to ordinary citizens, they would hold their governments to account. Now let's try and monitor these monies by engaging in global dialogue where we know commitments, big monies have been committed. How are these going to trickle down to the ordinary citizen? It can only happen if we have the information, we have access to those commitments, and we have plans that have clear indicators for success, and that information should be in the hands of ordinary citizens, civil society. And we need African think tanks. My own organization is making an effort, but there hasn't been investment in cultivating that culture. African networks are not self-propelling. You are not just driven by passion. You need to organize people just like the farming community. It's not organized, it's highly politicized. And until we can organize our farmers to use knowledge, to use evidence collectively, we will always have global commitments that fail at implementation. So I think this is where the challenge, and this is where we need the media that can ring the right bells in terms of what is happening. And we need the local think tanks to generate the information from local communities and share it. And I think the media role is critical there.
Hi, Lindiwe, it's Anna here. Some people claim that the real problem in feeding Africa is the population growth, rather than giving people the tools to grow what they need, and that if the population continues to grow the way it is, that feeding Africa will never be feasible. What's your position on that?
It's a very interesting intervention, because if we say, all right, we kept growth at current levels, 2.23% per annum growth in Africa, we are already not feeding ourselves with the current numbers. You cannot run away from the agenda of improving productivity, because this current crisis exposed the whole world to new phenomena that are now taking away from the little food that we have. I'll give you the two major challenges that we face. The issue of biofuels. Some statistics point to up to 50% of the current global food crisis being attributed to food stocks being diverted to biofuels. That is not going to stop, because countries have the mandate to do what they want with their own policies. The other challenge is climate change. We are expecting that we are going to lose vast amounts of land as a result of climate change, and there will be less land available for agriculture. Now, even if we were to cap the population growth, what are we doing about sustainable production and the mouths that we have now? Then on the other side, if you look at the population capping agenda, I mean, this is human nature. You are talking of procreation, which is human nature, and cultural issues, whereby really to embark on a war which is talking about reducing the number of mouths to feed is a longer term, more difficult agenda than the issue of meeting the increased demand for food with the technologies we have. The technologies are there, the people want to farm are there. What we are lacking is a conducive policy environment and investments in terms of money to make that happen. So I think, yes, whilst we listen to that agenda, first things first, let's improve productivity, because we need that extra food that we cannot run away from.